All right, in this video, we're going to be talking about partial types. And basically, a partial type is a way to split a definition of a type into multiple parts, and those parts can be moved into different files. So I'm going to go ahead and fire up a new project, and we'll see what partial types look like.
Now, while you're getting this new project established, let me ask a quick question. Why would we want to do something like this?
The primary reason that partial types were created in the first place by the C# developers is to facilitate design time or designers in tooling. So for example, in Visual Studio, we could fire up a WinForms project, and as we edit the designer of the WinForm, the Visual Studio will go out behind the scenes and generate a bunch of code for us. Now the problem is that file it generates, none of our changes to that file will ever be saved, because every time we go back into the designer and move around some controls, all that code's going to be erased and recreated. So what it does instead is to allow us to not only have a designed class that is generated by a tool, we can also write our own logic for that class by splitting the definition of the class into two. One part is in one file that is never touched by the designer, which is only touched by us. The other part is put into another file that's touched only by the designer and not by us.
Okay.
The second reason is that occasionally, in very limited circumstances, you might find yourself creating larger classes, or for accessibility reasons, you might want to break out certain methods or nested types into a different file. However, always think very carefully about those cases. Microsoft itself discourages you from using partial types in most scenarios.
Okay.
Okay.
So partial types, they look like normal types, and they can either be interfaces, structures, or classes. I've never seen a partial interface used ever, but you'll normally see partial classes around, so I'll show you what that looks like. And something important to note is that these two classes are actually the same class. Each one of these individual units is referred to as a part. So this is a part and this is a part, but there's still one class.
Okay.
Now I could theoretically shoot this part into any other file that I want, but there are some very important constraints that you have to keep in mind when you want a class to be partial. The first is they have to be in the same namespace.
Okay.
The second is they have to have the same name. And the third is they have to have the keyword partial in front of it. If I were not to put this partial keyword in front of it on one or either of these classes, I would get an error, as you see right there. Mm-hmm. It's also important to note that partial is not a traditional keyword. You can use the word partial as a variable name or identifier if you want to. It only has meaning to the compiler when it's used in this context and one other context that we'll talk about later. So that's a partial class. If I were to define a partial interface, it would be pretty much the same thing. That's not how you spell partial.
No, it's not. Neither is that.
But you're getting closer.
Let's just call this iInterface, best interface name ever, and you see that this is considered a valid code.
Now do these different parts get combined at compile time?
Yes. You can have as many partial parts as you want, and when the assembly is compiled by the C# compiler, it will literally take this part and this part, treat them as the same class, and emit out an assembly that, for all intents and purposes, these are the same class. And that's all done by compile time, which is important to know because it introduces another constraint that I should have talked about earlier, where you cannot have a partial class that spans assemblies. So every assembly that you have has to have all the partial types defined inside that assembly, and you cannot create a partial type in one assembly and compile another assembly with another partial type, because that just won't work.
Okay.
So basically, now that these are pretty much the same class, any method, any member, any field I put in either of these classes will be accessible from the other, especially including if they're private, which is the main reasoning behind partial classes instead of using other means to do the designing originally. So if I were to say private int myInt, I can make a method called void myMethod. and you see that my int is accessible from this part. And just to bring this further, I'm going to go ahead and bring my class out into another file.
I was actually going to ask if you would do that.
So now I have another class. I can actually just call this partial. Now my class has 3 parts, but I'm actually going to steal this part and delete it, so it only has 2 for now. And so now you see that these are in different files, but I can still access my int, just as I could access my method from this part.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I mean, that's
so,
pretty straightforward. Now, are there any
it is-
special considerations that we
Well,
need to keep in mind when working with these?
There's quite a few. If you have code that depends on the order in which your parameter or the order in which your fields are defined, if that matters in your code, which it really shouldn't, I just want to point out that the C# compiler or the C# specification does not guarantee the order in which it'll combine the members between these 2 partial parts.
So the
when it
parts could
combines
get combined in any order, is what you're saying.
Yes, there's no defined order. And there are instances where if you do something crazy, you could have field initializers that depend on each other, and that might work until you throw in a partial class, in which case the behavior becomes undefined. But you shouldn't be doing that anyway. The second consideration is that with attributes, the attributes that you define on a partial class are shared between the 2 partial classes, as in they are combined. If I were to have an attribute that allows itself to be defined multiple times on each class, if I were to define it on both partial classes, that's not the same thing as using one attribute. That's the same thing as defining 2 of those attributes on that class.
Okay.
The third consideration is that generic or how generics work is if I were to say this now has a generic argument, this class is no longer, well, first of all, this class is no longer considered by the C# compiler to be the same class. But if I were to make it the same class, I would have to define not only the same amount of arguments, generic parameters, but also the same names of generic parameters. So for example, this is right because both are targ. If I were to add something that made it not targ, you see that we get a compiler error on both of these definitions.
Okay.
The third constraint in regards to generics is that generic constraints are either included on both, included on one, or not included if you don't have generic constraints. And what I mean by that is if I were to constrain this argument by having it requiring that it's an integer, or that's not going to work obviously, requiring that it's a class, now you see that this is still valid code. But as far as this part is concerned, this type constraint still holds true.
Okay.
However, if I were to say now over here, let's actually add in 2 targs just to prove this more concisely. So now we have 2, they're misspelled, this has a capital. We have 2 generic parameters. And if I were to supply a different constraint over here, so where targ2 is a double, or not a double, it is a class again, let's just say, we now get an error. Because like I said, either you omit the constraints on one partial part, or you have to define the same constraints on both partial parts, or as many partial parts as you have. So this is invalid. But if I were to copy this constraint over here, that would be considered valid. If I were to copy this constraint over here, that would be considered to be valid.
Okay.
So that's the only other consideration when dealing with generics is that any attribute applied to generic parameters are combined. If I were to apply an attribute to targ right here, that would be combined with whatever attributes I apply to targ over here. And so it's the exact same behavior as before with the stuff. So now with the constraints. So now I'm going to go ahead and nuke these generics right now because that's all the considerations we have to deal with when working with generics. And I'm going to talk about base classes. And base classes are very interesting because even in generated code, we're going to have most of the time we're going to be having partial classes that inherit from another class. And that brings in another consideration. I'm going to create a third class in my project, and I'm going to call it base class. And base class is just going to be empty. It's irrelevant what the actual definition of this class is, other than now my class inherits from base class. Just like with generic type constraints, you can either have base class implemented or explicitly defined on one or both, but they have to be the same if you decide to do them on both. For example, if I were to create another base class called base class 2, for example, and I were to say this my class implements base class 2, this would generate a compiler error because now we are conflicting in what our partial types implement as the base class.
Implementing two different things.
But if I were to do this, this is now valid. But, of course, one of them is now redundant, which ReSharper is telling me about. So I can go ahead and nuke that again, and again, this base class, for all intents and purposes, is this class, everything is combined properly. What?
Well, I was going to ask, if you're breaking this up over two separate files that I'd like to assume you're not going to have both files up at all times, I mean, would you consider it wise to go ahead and define them both in both locations just so that you can kind of keep track of who's implementing what, or would you avoid that?
I may or may not, depending on the situation. Generally speaking, if I'm working in WinForms, I will omit the base class because it just feels like clutter.
Okay.
It depends on how but you're right. If you like that sort of thing, if you like that sort of explicitness as far as what your base class is, then by all means, explicitly define it on every part.
Sure.
But you're not required to.
Okay.
Interfaces work a bit different, though, because obviously in C# you can implement multiple interfaces per class. So, for example, if I were to go ahead and nuke these guys for now, and I can go ahead and add two interfaces to my project. Let's call this interface 1 and interface 2. And if I were to go back to my program class, or a program file, I can go ahead and we're done with inheritance for now, so I'm going to go ahead and nuke that as well. If I were to go ahead and to implement interface 1, this class now implements interface 1. I mean, obviously. But I can also... The interfaces act just as attributes. So I could also say my class 2 is going to be implementing interface 2.
That's very interesting.
Now, do they both implement both interfaces 1 and 2, or does one part make reference to interface 1? Or
both implement both interfaces. So, for example, I'm going to put method 1 on interface 1, and on interface 2, I'm going to put method 2. Now, what I'm going to do is something I would very, very much discourage you ever doing. But you can do this.
But just to the point, yeah.
Interface 2 has method 2. Interface 1 has method 1. I'm going to go ahead and implement interface 1 over here. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to implement interface 2 over here.
Right, which should be just fine.
Yep. And as you see, the compiler errors went away.
Right.
So interfaces are combined just like base classes.
Very cool.
So the next consideration is modifiers on the individual classes. And modifiers behave similarly to how everything else has behaved. For example, so I'm going to go ahead and nuke our interface code for example for now, because that's about it for interfaces. So you see right here that this is a public class. This, as a result, will also be a public class.
Even though it doesn't actually explicitly say that.
Right. It will be determined based off the other part that define the accessibility. But if I were to give this a conflicting accessibility modifier by marking this as internal, I now get a compiler error because both parts have different accessibility. So remember that generally what I would recommend, redundancy in this case, to always put in your accessibility modifiers on every part that you implement so that you don't get confused if you're working with an internal or public class.
Right. So you're not like putting public somewhere, maybe private or something else somewhere else.
Right. So you don't get confused because accessibility is very important. The next modifier that we can talk about is abstract. Abstract works pretty much the exact same way as public and or the accessibility modifiers. If I go ahead and declare this class as abstract, this part is now also abstract. I can legally also say abstract over here if I wanted to, but that is redundant. Only one of them has to be marked as abstract. The same behavior is observable with sealed. If I were to mark this class as sealed, this part is now sealed because obviously they're the same class. If I were to mark this part as sealed, this is perfectly legal, albeit redundant. Thirdly, if I were to mark one part as sealed and the other part as abstract, I get an error. And that's because sealed and abstract cannot be combined, even if they're marked on different parts. The final consideration when dealing with partial classes is that when you define unsafe code, the unsafe, or when you define a class as unsafe, the unsafe modifier will make an individual part unsafe, not the whole class unsafe, which kind of defies all the behavior that you've seen thus far with attributes and modifiers. So I'm going to go ahead and enable unsafe code in my console application so that I can show this example. I'm going to go ahead and do that over in the build tab, allow unsafe code. And now I'm going to mark the one on the left as unsafe. Sorry, I'm going to mark it as unsafe over here. Now I'm going to write some unsafe code. So I'm going to write a public unsafe code method. And this unsafe code method is going to have some unsafe code. Now this is legal because of this unsafe modifier. If I were to remove this unsafe modifier, this would not be legal. However, if I were to copy this method over into this part, well, and change the name because you cannot have conflicting names, obviously, this is now illegal because this part does not have the unsafe modifier attached to it.
It seems like this could be kind of another way to illustrate how you could use partial classes in the first place. Because you could take anything that you have that is going to be unsafe and kind of step outside the bounds of what C# expects you to do, and you can partition that off in its own little area of code.
Yeah. I mean, you can mark individual methods as unsafe, but if you have a group of methods that are unsafe for whatever black magic you are performing for whatever purpose, then you can certainly, use a partial unsafe part and put all your methods in there.
Cool.
And so, that's it as far as the C# language specification is concerned about partials.
Nice. Okay, well, with that, we'll go ahead and conclude this video. Thanks a lot.